Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe-BrainSpotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.
Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist here with you. And I will remind you, as always, that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute working with a licensed professional in your area. And I do strongly recommend working with a licensed professional in your area if you can. If not, please consider virtual services. And I'm not talking about ChatGPT or any of the AI services at all. Really, humans healing requires other humans, not tech. So, today's podcast, we have a principal person we're going to be talking about, but we also have a returning guest as well who happens to have a loving relationship with our principal guest. So our returning guest is Steve Sawyer, but we're going to be mainly talking today with his lovely wife, Keri Swayer. And Keri Swayer is an advanced yoga facilitator, seasoned speaker, and trainer with over a decade of experience in trauma-sensitive practices. She is the founder of the Open View Yoga and co-founder and somatic director of Developmental Trauma Training Institute, DTTI. Wow, I'm just screwing up today. I'm going to blame it on the congestion I've got at the moment. DTTI. Keri has also served as a training coordinator and liaison for the Center for Training and Embodiment. As a licensed trainer in trauma-sensitive yoga, Keri has supported professionals and communities in developing compassionate, body-centered practices that emphasize safety, choice, and present moment awareness. She is deeply dedicated to creating spaces that empower individuals to reconnect with themselves and foster genuine healing. She has regular consultants with therapists, yoga professionals, and other professionals to build embodied practices into clinical and community settings. Through her facilitating, mentorship, collaborative leadership, Keri continues to inspire both students and professionals in the field of trauma and recovery and embodied practice. Steve, Keri, welcome to Untying Knots.
Thanks, Perry. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to be back, Perry. It's always a beautiful conversation we get to have, so I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise. So, Steve, as you're sort of an old hand here, I'm going to put my focus more over towards Keri here. And as I always ask everybody, the question is, how did you get here?
So for me, I was becoming a yoga teacher quite some time ago, and I started bringing yoga into adolescent treatment facilities. And as I was, bringing, more body-based practices in and working with the youth there, I just found that I felt like it wasn't quite clicking. And if anything, it seemed kind of off. And it really put me in this trajectory of looking for body-based practices that worked more with people who were suffering from having traumatic experiences in their lives. And so what I found through many of these, different facilities is that a lot of the kids had experienced very traumatic things. And I actually, from there, happened to kind of research and fall upon some evidence-based practices, which is trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga. And I really began my journey with trauma sensitivity and with more body-based therapeutic interventions at that time.
Lovely. And so bring this into, so how did you two start combining this together for the DTI aspects of this?
Yeah, so when we were in the treatment program that I was running and chief clinical officer for, we were working with developmental trauma clients primarily, and we worked from age spans of tweens, we would call them, early preteens, all the way through young adults. And one of the elements of the programming was to, be able to get them more connected to their body. And, I've been on here before and talked a lot about brain spotting and its roots. And in that, our team, we had a whole clinical team spanning the country that was focused on getting individuals into their body, into their history, and helping release it. And oftentimes, people with developmental trauma particularly have a lacking connection to their body, which is a trauma-based adaptation of survival. And we were working to establish that being online to be able to get access to healing. And Keri really began with some trauma, some basic yoga classes as a yoga instructor. And much like the work the Trauma Center for Embodiment kind of discovered, there was a reaction to it. There was struggle within it. And when Keri really discovered the Trauma Center for Embodiment's work, and at that time it was based out of the Trauma Center of Boston, it was a piece in the puzzle that had been missing for us, and we'd been operating for quite a while, and we're working with really young people from around the world in our programs, and nobody had really explored this with the majority of these clients. The interoceptive capability, that be able to be interoceptive is the ability to sense one's body and their connection to it and have sensation in it. And, it was lacking over and over again. A known thing in the trauma treatment field of, dissociation, which is often villainized, but it's one of the most profound survival mechanisms that exist for people to survive trauma. And so Keri had discovered this evidence-based practice and went trained in it, and has been working with them for a long time now, and is one of the leaders in the community. And she had a missing equation, and suddenly all of our trauma work went better, easier, and often this element really was its capability to heal by itself without ever talking about the trauma was profound. So some young people would report complete healing experiences and shifts in their bodies, and therapists would witness it and hear it was coming from this yoga experience that Keri was facilitating in the woods. And so it really helped put the pieces of the puzzle together, along with the other modalities we were using, and often was a treatment in and of itself, and not always liked by everybody, but often people reporting that it was so effective and helpful to them. And ultimately reconnecting to their body, which Bessel's book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks about, reconnecting to some of their struggle and suffering, but then also healing through that process without even talking a word about the trauma itself. Pretty profound, and I'm still enamored by its capability and what it tells us, about healing coming from within.
Okay, and that's quite a bit. So, Keri, tell us a bit more about what is trauma-sensitive yoga, and especially how does this differ from the yoga that you can get from your local studio down the street, or the variances of, I know there's several different variances of yoga out there, but what makes this, how is it defined? What makes it what it is?
Yeah, so it really was developed, like Steve said, in the Trauma Center over in Boston, Massachusetts. And the founder, David Emerson, collaborated with Bessel van der Kolk to kind of begin this model that's really kind of based on a modified Hatha style of yoga. It really was kind of created more as a somatic intervention or therapy for people who have complex trauma, developmental trauma, also, treatment-resistant PTSD. And so it's really kind of a model on its own. And really, it is a type of yoga that is modified to kind of maximize experiences of empowerment and really to cultivate a more positive relationship to one's body. And so it gives opportunities really for participants to fully engage and be in charge of themselves through kind of this felt sense of their body. You know, trauma can really take hold in the absence of choice. You know, many people who've been through traumatic experiences have extreme lack of choice in their lives during that time. And then also as, they continue in life. And so TCTSY is really working toward empowerment, choice making, having opportunities to really explore beyond kind of this learned sense of helplessness into, I can change the way my body feels. I can change the trajectory of my life. And so it is different from, stepping into a yoga studio or going to a yoga class in many ways. But it really is kind of a model that's orientated toward treatment for complex trauma and PTSD, where the power really resides within the individual and not with the facilitator or the yoga teacher.
So that sort of power imbalance is something that is going to exist in probably more your standard down the street yoga studio with whoever is running that program, which is also a business, so it's trying to bring in money. So there's that. But that sense of how many people are even just recognizing the connection to their body, let alone where the trauma is coming in versus what we bring into therapy. And there's a very definitive aspect of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
When people kind of go to a yoga studio or take regular yoga classes, it's really orientated toward an external process of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Put your hand here, put your foot there. You have to look a specific way, kind of in this modern Western world, we might see pictures of people doing yoga that are probably inaccessible to most of us, right? And it's all building to one perfection of a form. And TCTSY really shifts from that external focus to an internal focus. One of the things that we know through neuroscience is that these neural pathways that go from our bodies to our brains are somewhat damaged, offline. Many neuroscientists talk about how when someone experiences a felt sense of their body and they have trauma, that it can just get kind of this flood of information into their system that they struggle to differentiate. And so they start to have a hard time being able to be connected with their body, being able to feel their body. And so one of the main kind of points around TCTSY is building more robust, pathways so that people can start feeling their body. I've worked with many people who talk about feeling numb, talk about not being able to feel parts of their body and so forth.
So I'll throw this out to both of you because in talking about the yoga, but also what Steve and I have talked about in the past with other things is the hyper-reliance on, shall we say, the king brain and that aspect of going into the external. What do you say more to people about who have not realized this disconnection to themselves and their body?
Yeah, it's a journey, right, to reestablish neural connections that have served as an adaptation, right, from trauma to not feel our bodies. it's a journey into that. And it doesn't have to be big, aggressive yoga classes or intense forums of following the instructor and seeking perfectionism, as Keri kind of highlighted there for this particular pose, but simple little experiences with the body. One thing I love about TCTSY is its simplicity. It can be done in a chair. The person chooses what they're going to do with this. So it can literally be as simple as a rolling of the head and the neck and experiencing the sensations of one's neck. So for people that are seeking to reestablish maybe connection to their body and pursuing yoga, but it doesn't have to be so extreme. It's very gentle, it's really simple, and it's little body experiences at a dosage. I use that word a lot in dosage, and Keri could go on about that for a while, of just experience my body at the level where I can keep accessible. And, profound findings in this research that 10 minutes of this with a practitioner would change a person's relationship with their body within 10 sessions. That's where the model really came from, was these small dosages with a practitioner giving them that experience. So that said, the ability to find a relationship with one body doesn't mean that we have to do extreme things. In fact, it's probably better to do it in a much more simple and contained and dosage-minded way. And so this model offers that for people in a way that feels inaccessible to a lot of people that have developmental or complex trauma. It's very accessible, very simple. And for a person to be able to go and build that relationship, is available to anyone. The idea that the healing comes from within. And sometimes people are chasing these big aggressive yoga classes, and that's what the study showed, they often felt worse or got more in their head in a self-attacking way versus kind of building that relationship with themselves. Keri's a lot of one of her classes, I love the term, befriending your body, right? To relations with your body and a new relationship in a new time and place. So it's available to everybody and doesn't have to be as complex as everybody's making it. Why
don't we go ahead and Keri talk about a bit more about dosage, because I think there is something in that for people who are listening and thinking about this, who just the idea of any of this, even if we're talking about dosage, seems frightening.
Yeah, dosage. And so if you think about the TCTSY model, there's a lot that goes into it. It really comes from kind of these underpinnings around trauma theory, around attachment theory, around neuroscience, and then it kind of creates these therapeutic goals. And one of the ways that we can work with people is through invitational language. And invitational language has to do not necessarily with choice, but really about our relationship with another person. And so I might say something like, if you'd like to, or you're welcome to, instead of put your hand here, put your foot there, right? Because it is choice-based, but it's also kind of this languaging that is working toward that speaking to that power dynamic in a way, because whenever you have a therapist, a yoga teacher, a regular teacher, whatever profession it is, walk into the room, suddenly there's a power dynamic, right? And so instead of pretending like it's not there, because most of our students and our clients are used to that, we are sharing power, right, through invitational language, through trying to open this space so that not a practitioner empowering someone else, but creating space so that they can empower themselves, right? And so the reason I'm bringing invitational language up is because that's part of the dosage, right? And so part of the dosage is, what words am I saying that can make this more complex, can make this more hard? Like if I were to say something like, you're welcome to explore this in your body, to someone who feels like they don't have a body, it doesn't make sense. That's a dosage issue, right? And so we might say something like, you might notice a sensation in your body. And so we're talking about interoception, kind of having this felt sense of your body. And so we might think about when people are coming into therapy, when they're moving into body-based practices, it can be really hard to face your body. It can be hard to connect. And so we might ask ourselves, how much can someone tolerate as far as noticing that felt sense of their body? And so, for instance, in a regular kind of, let's say you have an hour-long session, you might sprinkle some of that interoceptive awareness into the session. If you're doing 10 minutes, maybe you want to have a little bit more interoceptive awareness in that session, right? But we might think about, what can someone kind of tolerate through feeling their body, especially someone who's been disconnected for, a long time, and, what might it feel like them to start to notice sensations or to feel their heart rate or to feel their breath, right? That could somewhat become triggering in itself. Right. So, what makes sense for the person, sitting in front of us? And that might be different depending on the day, depending on their work in therapy and so forth.
Which also makes me think about, again, going to that power dynamic, how much our societies have been pushing the idea of not being aware of your body, avoid your body, numb out your body, pay more attention to whatever the cashmere sofa or shirt you're wearing versus what's going on in that sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I can hear all the time, people will talk to me and be like, oh, I just want to go to a yoga class, hear the music, pounding, and just follow the instructor and just kind of zone out. Right. And that's the opposite of TCTSY, where we're really kind of focusing on that internal experience and starting to grow in the present moment with being able to feel our body, make choices, possibly make choices based upon how our body's feeling, all within the kind of this collaborative environment with a practitioner, because relationships matter when you're talking about complex and developmental trauma. And so there's this shared authentic experience where you are practicing yoga, the participant is practicing yoga, you're noticing feelings and sensations in your body while they are, and it becomes kind of this shared authentic experience, which many of our, clients may not have had experiences of that in their lives that are healthy, right? And so it becomes a relational approach, right? Not in a regular yoga class where you're kind of walking through lines of people, wanting to correct their posture or their alignment, more so a modality that's relational and you're practicing together.
Which very much brings up the power and control dynamic, which I know Steve and I have often talked about, where even when we talk about the developmental trauma and the attachment, power dynamics are still involved in those relationships as well. And how many people have never questioned those things, let alone tried to reorganize them, especially for themselves. So this chance to do that is something that, we want to use the invitational language, but also just begin to make them aware of it.
Building awareness. What came up for me is like these structures. I said people are chasing. Breath work has gotten really popular, now. And, people's nervous systems have been pre-programmed from early life experience on simple things like even breath, right? So now I'm going to take myself and put myself in a structure of my instructors telling me how to breathe. And people get a lot of ab reaction. I hear stories over and over again, just by simple exercises of noticing the breath, how much that can bring up for people. This is so underestimated in the mental health, especially the Western mental health treatment world, of telling people how to breathe, to count their breaths. And we're directly not just in a power control dynamic relationally, but we're now in a power control dynamic with their autonomic nervous system. So underestimated by the Western mental health world of telling people how to breathe, where to focus, and controlling that process, even not even realizing we're telling people to control something that's been autonomically programmed into the brain, that's right at the center of our trauma responses. Our breath, bracing for impact, has been programmed into people's nervous system structure from early in life, holding their breath while there's conflict in the home or whatever it is, and in here to just experience your breath versus to tell you how to breathe and how to breathe correctly, and then all those power and control facilitator dynamics that are in place. Very different way of introducing somebody's experience with something so simple, their breath, but a very complex structure that now, we're telling it what to do versus to just experience it.
Yeah, and so it's a very non-directive approach, which is very different also than other body-based therapies out there. And so instead of the practitioner telling someone what to do, what's good for them to do in their body, which we don't really know, we're creating space for people to have their own experience and to find what feels useful, what feels helpful, and what works in their own body.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say to those who want to properly get trained in this as a yoga producer or provider, as well as someone who wants to just learn about it themselves? Because we also want to be very conscious, as I did with my opening, is that there are those who want to jump over certain areas because they don't want to deal with that discomfort in that. So both in that sense of training, but also that sense of somebody trying to sidestep something because they think they can avoid dealing with it.
We don't heal by avoidance, right? Avoidance is the natural response to all traumatic experience, right? And so our body being part of going through that experience to avoid discomfort, right? To avoid our body completely, to avoid the trauma, all leads to it speaking louder and continuously in a person's life. So in that, having these experiences, right, of connection to their body in a much more contained, that dosage word being very important, instead of overriding and avoiding, is really what TCTSY is really all about, right? We're stepping towards the body. We're stepping towards what naturally is happening in the body with these trauma adaptations that are present with it, and reestablishing connection in a far more gentle way, driven from within. That person is really making powerful choices for themselves of how much they're experiencing their body, what the physical posture is, and really stepping towards things is how healing happens, right? Not avoiding it, and to step towards our body allows a person to have an experience that includes their full self, right? The physical self. If we do not include the step towards the physical self, you can never even experience feeling whole or a feeling of stability, right? Day in, day out, our body is this huge part of us, and then to avoid that, put it aside, and not work with that in therapy or in your own personal healing journey, leaves you a whole part of your existence aside, and it really leaves it kind of trapped in the past, because the body's going to react and respond, based upon its programming early on. So, avoidance is not healing, and there's. Me and you both know, Perry, that avoidance is a big thing that gets taught to people around a lot of trauma responses. So avoiding isn't healing. Stepping towards it in these small dosages is a course of healing that allows a person to get to fullest sense of self and a befriended relationship with their body.
Yeah, and I think also the hope is that through things like invitational language, predictability, and all the other things that you learn around TCTSY, is that people can start to have enough space created that they can start to step into that work, right? And so, I've trained a lot of different therapists, a lot of mental health therapists, who have done the talk therapy, have done kind of their own work, who step into the space feeling like they're kind of done. And then through TCTSY and through kind of this body-based experience, not me giving them an experience, but them having their own internal experience with themselves, things start to come back up, right? And so it's possible that sometimes even the work is avoided through a therapist modality until they've kind of been able to take a look at some of their work that maybe they thought was done. Right? And so there's different ways that you can, become trained in this modality. And the first way is really through a foundational program. And so that's available for people if they're interested in learning about it. And so, anyone can join that. Therapists, nurses, yoga teachers, mentors, coaches.
Yeah, and I think worthy of mentioning here, David Emerson's book, Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga, is a great introduction for the general public to see that. And again, even some people will see Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga, they in their mind immediately have this image of doing yoga classes and then want to step away from that. But Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga, gives you a sense of some of what Keri's talking about here, and the sense of, my body's a part of this relationship I'm building with myself and with my trauma that needs to be included in the puzzle. If it's not lasting, because the body again is going to speak. That score, the body keeps the score from Bessel van der Kolk. It's going to speak in our lives if we don't build relationship with these trauma things that are stored in the body and our history that's stored in our body. So we can build a relationship, a direct connection to it. And it doesn't have to be so complex or aggressive, as we're talking about some of these yoga classes are. There's people that are doing yoga classes for exercise. I just listened to somebody the other day talking about going into, a 100 and so many degree room and aggressively doing yoga. And that's exercise, but that's not necessarily befriending your body if it's not done in a really dosage-minded way. And that's right. Western culture. Everything's so intense all the time, right? Intense, exercise, intense yoga is a culture that's out there. And how many people are overriding and avoiding their body right in that class? It's being given right in that class. The structure is teaching people to override their experience with their body versus to just experience it, to just be with your body for a little bit with somebody helping facilitate that.
Still issues with the power and control, in this case, power and control over my own body in these classes.
There's a really great book by Matthew Rudemsky, and it's called Surviving Modern Yoga, Cult Dynamics, Leaders, and What Survivors Can Teach Us. Right? So I've heard him speak. He's just does a great job talking about power dynamics in, the modern, Western world around yoga.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect place for us to take a break here and let that all soak in for all of you. So we'll be back shortly here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Keri and Steve Sawyer. Steve is a licensed clinical social worker, and Keri is a certified yoga instructor with a trauma-centric, or the TCCSY. So I'm just going to stop there. So we'll be back shortly.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe-brainspotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Steve and Keri Swayer, who is Steve, as you've heard from some of our past episodes, is a licensed clinical social worker, and his beloved wife, Keri, who is a trauma-sensitive yoga instructor. And we're talking about trauma-sensitive yoga. So, as we come back into this, Keri, one of the criticisms that can also happen a lot with various healing modalities is the evidence-based conversation. What do you have to say on that with the yoga?
TCTSY is actually very heavily studied. And so if you go to traumasensitiveyoga.com and look under the research tab, if you're someone who likes to dive in deep, you will love that tab. Mm-hmm. However, one of the ways that TCTSY really kind of first started making its way into therapy settings was really through some studies through the National Institute of Health. And they found that, 2 months post TCTSY and an hour of psychotherapy, weekly, they found that 52% of people could no longer be diagnosed as having PTSD, really due to that drop in symptomology. And since then, there's been so much research, so many studies. And, just recently, TCTSY is kind of now known for the world's kind of first and only yoga-based intervention for complex trauma, for PTSD, that really has been found to be as effective as talk therapy, really through these 20 years of research. So pretty amazing there.
So I want to very much distinctly add, it's the combination of the two, not one or the other. Yeah. Between the therapy and the yoga, it's a combination of the two that worked, as opposed to one or the other. Because again, we have some people, it's like, if I just go and do the yoga, I don't have to deal with talk therapy at all. Or if I just go do the talk therapy, I don't have to deal with the yoga at all. It's like, it's the combination of the two.
Well, actually, in the first study I mentioned, it was a combination of the two. In the second study that I mentioned, it was only TCTSY. And it was found to be just as effective as traditional talk therapy. It actually worked faster.
Right. Because it actually did mean tuning in.
TCTSY in the second study, yeah.
Right. But ultimately, again, we want to encourage as broad of healing as possible, which is working with the two.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just one. Perfect. So I know we didn't go into it in the first half just because we're trying to get some of the big stuff, but we can drill down and focus a little more. So you talked about things like invitational language. Can you give a more sense of that and some of the associated things, such as in the co-regulation that comes up in this process?
So through TCTSY, we do, work with invitational language, like we talked about, power dynamics, and really creating space so that those can empower themselves through a practice that really is choice-based. And sometimes in traditional yoga, if you're in a yoga class, you might hear someone say, okay, you could do this, but now the unspoken words are kind of but if you can't do that, do this. In TCTSY, we're really creating choice for the sake of choice that's accessible for everyone. You could do this or you could do that. Why? Because trauma is an experience of extreme lack of choice. And even in the aftermath of trauma, it continues to live in people's lives, this feeling of having a lack of choice. And so TCTSY really focuses on choice making. You could do this or you could do that. It's your choice. Okay? From there, we also talked a little bit about interoception and this idea around building more robust interoceptive pathways for this felt sense of our body. And we start to see things like, you might notice a feeling or sensation in your body here or there. Moving forward from there, we start to think a little bit about taking effective action through the lens of agency, or this idea that we can change the way our body feels, that we can change the trajectory of our lives. And so TCTSY starts to put together choice making based upon a felt sense of your body, to start to notice shifts, to start to notice that I can change the way that my body feels. Right? Another kind of core component around TCTSY has to do with rhythms and time, because, trauma really is timeless. And so many people who've been through traumatic experiences can struggle, having a rhythm within themselves, having a rhythm with someone else, as far as, whether it's talking back and forth or giving or taking, or how close you're standing to someone else. And so TCTSY also focuses on kind of connecting and building rhythms within the person themselves, and then also, between that person and the facilitator. Right? So kind of a creating rhythms component there. And so some of the core components from TCTSY are really from, underpinning theories around, things like trauma and attachment, which makes it really important for the TCTSY model. So you might not see some of these things in different types of yoga or different types of yoga classes.
And I also like to highlight that there's lots of people out there training trauma-sensitive yoga, but this is a very specific model. So they may or may not have any of this built into it. So to proceed with caution and wisdom around the trauma center, trauma-sensitive yoga was really developed by really client-informed care, right? They went and they interviewed individuals carefully about what they were experiencing. Yeah. And they really systematically worked through and tried to address each one of these issues. So people can have a therapist who's doing trauma-sensitive yoga with them, and it might not have any of these components as part of it. I mean, might have one or the other, or people have made their own takes on that. But this is a model. This is an actual model that was built systematically to address each of these underpinnings of power and control dynamics and language and all these things that are an element of the healing journey. So it's very it's, well, as noted, well researched and well worked through with people with PTSD or CPTSD, developmental trauma, that informed the practice, right? It's really client informed and client built, not practitioner built or yoga teacher built per se. It's a combination, of course, of both. But the clients really informed this practice and this model at a pretty profound level of them hearing shame dynamics come up and then really trying to carefully address each one of those in a very systematic way.
Yeah, it's really true. And one of the things that happened at the beginning and throughout is that kind of that collaboration with David Emerson and Bessel van der Kolk. It was also that collaboration through the participants. and many other mental health therapists in that area. And so that collaboration really helped inform the model. You might read about some of that in The Body Keeps the Score. The yoga in that book that was heavily, studied and talked about in that book is this model, trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga.
All right. So I think on another of those levels of power and control that comes up, and is also questions that also comes up about the nature of, and Steve, if we were talking about this at our last training, some of the stuff that David Grant is dealing with and such, is the appropriation and appreciation conversation when it comes to yoga. There are those who feel that yoga should have stayed very much something of the Indian subcontinent and their ownership and control over it versus how it's gotten westernized. And now as we look at the standpoint of yoga and then trauma-informed, for people being helped by it, being helped all over the world as it, is it still something that we can say has respect to its roots? So what do you guys say when you start hearing someone who's going to come up with that question about appropriation and appreciation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I found that, yoga in itself over the last 500 years has definitely been colonized. And that's where all the yoga these days in the United States really comes from. And TCTSY isn't different from that. It does come from that Western U.S. lens that also has deeper roots in yoga in different ways. Like if you were to say the word yoga in India, they might not think about that physical practice. And that's most of what we've been talking about today. But there are other things around nonviolence, non-harming, and things like that come into practice in TCTSY that have to do with more of that larger scope of yoga. But I think what's so important is to just kind of, no matter what you're doing, to be open around, seeking help from anyone. From India who is engaged in yoga, and just really kind of being open to listening to what people have to say and their experiences around that. So many times, in these modalities, I feel like one of the things that TCTSY has always kind of been a part of is just really being open to what other people say. To how they're experiencing it, to how it's landing within them. And I think that's just so important. No matter what modality we're using, no matter what we're saying, and as practitioners, I think one of the most important things, that I can do for sure, is to stay open in the process, to be able to take feedback, and be able to really think about what is this other person's experience instead of making it about me or what I'm saying, and really just to be able to bring that into myself and kind of that, there's part of this yoga process that has to do with self-study and ask ourselves, first of all, is what we're doing helping? How is this other person experiencing what we're doing? Are there changes we need to make, right? Have we said something? Have we done something that maybe would be really useful and helpful if we looked at that in a different way, right? So kind of that openness, that self-study, and also I think a really nonviolent view of what we're doing. And how do we bring that into our practices as trauma-sensitive yoga practitioners as well? So just a thought. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, for me, I don't profess to know a lot about yoga's roots. I don't profess to know a lot about how it's practiced in India differently. And like you said, it's for people who live it as a way of life, right? And in that, one thing I really like about TCTSY as it comes to this appropriation element is that the answers come from within the person, right? So the power and control dynamic of really seeking to eliminate too much facilitation, but that the answers and the connection is going to come from within them. And when I think about yoga practiced in India, the meditational practices, eating practices, of being able to have a compassionate presence, right? Ultimately, it's like the word that's thrown all over in the Western world, namaste, right? To acknowledge the light in another person, etc. That there is, when I look at Westernized yoga and colonization of a lot of things in our world, right? Taking away from some other culture or wisdom, and then now we're going to systematize it and turn it into a modality. But when you look at the raw essence of how TCTSY works, it really relies on connecting with that individual in a space with mindfulness of dosage, so not being violent in our power hierarchical facilitation dynamics, and really the person experiencing their own body. That a lot of what we see in a lot of Westernized yoga, facilitation, perfectionism, posture, these kinds of things, which was such a small part of what India was focused on and what the yogis practiced, right? Of compassionate presence. Well, this other person in front of us is experiencing their own body, that maybe it's one of the more purified forms of that experience, right? Instead of it being so focused on the posture and getting it right, that you're experiencing your own body, I'm here to witness you compassionately in that presence, really might be one of the more unwesternized elements of what TCTSY offers that way, right? Compassionate presence, while you explore and find some of your own inner wisdom that's lurking in your body, and also that trauma that's there, to befriend both and spend time with both. But for me, there's so much I don't profess and that to know a lot about a true yoga culture where it was based upon. But from the limited knowledge I do have of that compassionate and embodying compassionate presence and acknowledging another person's light that lives inside of them, I can't, think of a lot of modalities of Western world approaches that really focus on that. So that's my thought and kind of take on it.
Very much so. I think one of the big things there, and as you said, it was Western culture does not have a good job of witnessing.
Yes.
As opposed to, it's got to be involved. It's got to be either the active and struggles to be the supportive, but it cannot witness and watch and understand and do the empathy that's there.
Yeah.
So that also brings into, how do we also recognize the power and control that's going on that fails to, again, witness?
Absolutely.
And as you said, feedback, right? Like witness, and then how am I affecting you in my presence? How is what I'm doing with you affecting you, and being really that relationship and time together of being a two-way street. Right, that you're teaching me. It's like the quote that says, when one person teaches, two people learn, right? What are we learning from every moment with these clients, and what are they learning about themselves and their relationship to us, and eliminating that agenda and that power and control dynamic of me being the facilitator. This model embodies that in a lot of ways. Right? So to me, that, going back to appropriation, there's key principles that are really strong at TCTSY that go back to the foundations of what Yogi studied and did, going back a long ways. And they obviously are known for their incredible relationship with their body, their ability to control their heart rate and do amazing physical feats, and they didn't get there by just, they spent time with their own body, endless hours in that, and just even giving people a dosage of experience with that, the raw component of what our bodies are capable of, and with trauma treatment to really empower them and that they can change their relationship with their body. That's exactly what the traditional use of yoga taught and showed.
And I think you meant appreciation, not appropriation.
Right?
Yeah. Just want to be clear. We're talking about appreciation here.
Yes.
So as we're starting to wrap up, we're just going to sort of speed run through this next question, which is, what do you think is a myth and reality around mental health?
A myth around mental health. I suppose that we mostly have to create a story and talk about trauma in order to resolve it, or that something necessarily has to release. I think that trauma therapy can have a lot less talking and more of a body-based approach, or both together, along with the idea of integration. I know that, sometimes, if you were to sprain your ankle, the reality is that your ankle would heal, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. And it's this way in healing trauma. So much of, in this world, we want, healed or broke, or, you know what I mean? Right. But instead, it's really kind of this journey of integration. And so you might not be who or how you were before a traumatic experience, but the amazing feat through healing is who you become after. And so I want to just kind of put that out there. A lot of times, even in body-based practices, people focus on release, get trauma out, get trauma out, get trauma out. But perhaps it's really more about integration.
Which I think can also be said as another example of the power and control, and even a denial that it's not the integration. It's get it out. You never have to deal with it again. Somehow you're going back to being that pristine versus you had experience.
Yeah, and that trauma avoidance that I mentioned earlier on, the natural adaptation is to avoid it. For me, the quote comes to mind as you were speaking, Keri. It's not about changing what happened; it's about changing how it lives within us. And that's one of my favorite quotes in all trauma work. The ability of changing and TCTSY. Being very focused on changing your experience of how it lives within your body to make connection to it, to befriend your body and all that's a journey. So, that word journey is really important too, and different things can happen in a person's life and it wells back up again or something. And then we can, this is an avenue of, for me, the word kind of making peace with it at some level versus getting it out. Right. And it being gone and it's never been, like it never happened, versus to find a different way of it living within us and then finding that peace that maybe we've never even known before, especially for people with developmental trauma.
So perhaps not just focusing on experiences of the past, but creating new experiences. And that's a big part of what integration is about.
So, where can folks find you if they wanted to know more, either about DTTI, more about the TSY, and even some of the books that we've mentioned here? I'll try to have some of these links as I can in the show notes.
Yeah, so you can check out DTTI.co, which is the website for the Developmental Trauma Training Institute. You can find TCTSY there. You can also check out the Center for Trauma Embodiment, which is healwithcfte.org. And that's where Trauma Center Trauma Sensitive Yoga lives as a program. So people can definitely find more information there. Steve mentioned the book Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga by David Emerson. Great resource. I'd also like to add in Trauma Sensitive Yoga in Therapy. It's a little bit of a newer book by David Emerson. That's a great read. So putting that out there as well.
And your personal site, OpenView Yoga.
Yes, .com. Yep. Yes, and there's definitely information there along with trainings and virtual classes and so forth.
All right. I want to thank you both for being on here and being able to share this information. And we'll be back with more things as we go forward, folks. Hopefully you're all well, and please explore getting the help you need. So take care.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.